Thank you, Madam President, for recognizing me for the purposes of this appeal. With respect to germaneness, this proposed amendment would make pushing someone onto a subway track, onto the tracks of a subway, a Class C violent felony. And the bill in chief, which I previously supported, is an excellent bill, actually. It provides rules and guidelines for the public as to what they should be doing in the event someone is pushed on the tracks. So these are obviously almost mirror the same issue. Now, if I may, I'd like to just discuss some of the statistics that we've seen and why this is such a critical and important bill. I have from the Daily News from February 14th of last year, a little bit less than a year ago. The title is, "Despite Big Decrease in Riders During COVID Pandemic, New York City Seeing Terrifying String of Strap Hangers Shoved Onto the Subway Tracks." If you look at the statistics, the average swipe of the turnstiles on a weekday prior to the pandemic was 5.5 million passengers. In 2020, 1.7 million riders were averaged a day. That's a 70% decline in ridership. So when you think about that ultimate decline, well, you know, that's unfortunate. That's part of the pandemic issues that we've been dealing with. However, with millions and millions of riders, less riders on the subway, there were still 26 individuals in the year 2020, 26 of them shoved onto the tracks. That was a 30% increase from 2019, 30% more than the year before when they had 70% more individuals riding the subway. And quite frankly, if I may suggest to my colleagues, subway pushing is not a typical type of crime because of the intent of it. Now, we have many people who are mentally ill, as we've seen. And unfortunately, because of some of the reforms that we've seen in the past few years, people are not in custody. And they're not getting the available services that they could have otherwise gotten with mental health issues. We have intentional acts where people certainly understand the nature and consequences of their actions. And when it's an intentional act, my friends, it's an act of terrorism. As we sit here today, with what we've just seen in the past few months, we have passengers standing on the stairway because they're terrified, because they're afraid to go to work. And so now, if I push someone on the tracks, we had an individual just recently pushed onto the tracks who sustained some injuries. It's probably a misdemeanor. If they're fortunately and lucky enough to get away with their life and climb back onto the platform, it's a harassment. It's not even a crime. So what this bill would do would create a new crime, making it a serious crime, of course, a Class C violent felony, for the mere act of pushing someone on the tracks where they could lose their lives. We have seen Michelle Alyssa go. We could go through many different names and many of these victims that we've seen, but quite frankly, the individuals who were the actors, the bad actors, Madam President, were people who otherwise have seen, without a terrible, terrible tragedy and loss of life, they otherwise just move through the criminal justice system, maybe get the mental help they need, but not those individuals that I'm specifically speaking of, the ones with the mental health issues, the ones that are doing it to be malicious. It's random, it's terrifying, and something needs to be done. So as such, Madam President, this bill is certainly germane to the underlying bill in chief, and quite frankly, it's something that we need to do now. This is the time for it. It's very timely. We're trying to get out of this pandemic. We're trying to have our businesses recover, and we're trying to let the citizens of this state just go to work without fear in their heart. Thank you, Madam President.